अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्री Gurave Namah. If we trace the progress of science over the last 5 millennia, from the times of the ancient Vedic civilization, the Mesopotamian civilization, and the Egyptian civilization till modern times, we find that one of the most noteworthy achievements of humankind has been the creation of knowledge. And the combined knowledge that we possess on this planet Earth is one of our greatest assets in the present and insurance for survival in the future. Interestingly, many thousands of years ago, in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna stated, Nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitra miha vidyate. He said, there is nothing so pure that you can possess as true knowledge. On the individual level, this urge to know is very intrinsic to our personality. We all loathe to be in a state of ignorance and seek the light of knowledge. It is a different matter that what somebody considers as knowledge, another may consider as ignorance. But the desire to know is very intrinsic to our being. And this has powered the drive to expand the frontiers of all the different branches of knowledge and add new branches. Amongst all these branches of knowledge developed on this planet Earth, science occupies the pride of place. It is particularly appealing to the intellectual elite because it is based on logical arguments and rationality, quantifiable facts, and verifiable procedures. And science is appealing to the masses because it raises our standards of living and provides us with the luxury and comfort that is important to all of us. This era is called the age of science. One, because science has made such rapid progress in the last few centuries. And secondly, because science touches all aspects of our life. We practically, in this modern world, revere and worship science. On any matter or issue, the scientific opinion is considered indisputable and the last word. And it is this reverence for science that makes us dedicate a large part of our life in acquiring scientific knowledge. And this interest, reverence, dedication to science has led to the establishment of institutes of learning, such as the Stanford University. In any list of premier scientific institutes of the world, Stanford would definitely figure amongst the top. So when I speak here, I can confidently assume that I am speaking to amongst the finest faculty and students in the field of science. However, when this talk was decided upon and the subject matter of the talk chosen, from your side, the subject chosen was science and spirituality. This indicates that even amongst the scientific community, there is a perceived need for converging science with spirituality. Why is this need perceived? How can we converge these two branches of knowledge? That is what I would like to discuss in today's talk. The reason why we talk of a convergence of science and spirituality is because a few hundred years ago, in the Western world, there was a divergence where each of these, science and spirituality, wanted to explain the whole field of knowledge from their viewpoint, which led to tremendous acrimony on both sides. And the result of this antagonism between science and spirituality is that today there is practically no overlap. You don't find a scientific paper which states that this law occurs because of the will of God. This divergence between science and spirituality has led to an unpalatable situation today, where we find that although science has placed tremendous power in our hands, such as nuclear power, it has not presented us with an ethical and moral system that teaches us the proper or improper use of that power. Science has enhanced our standard of living, but the resultant industrialization, urbanization has led to the rapid depletion of non-renewable energy and mineral resources, and the deterioration of the ecosystem, the pollution of the earth, the water, and the air. The aim of science was to remove the miseries of humankind and make us experience happiness and joy. However, many people feel that this has definitely not come about. And if we compare, we would probably find that our great grandfathers were happier people than us, even though we possess far greater material luxuries. Why is that so? Because happiness is not a result of the amount of external goods we possess, but the state of our mind. The Western philosopher John Milton had put it so nicely when he said, "The mind is a thing of its own, and in itself can make you experience heaven in hell and hell in heaven." Science has unfortunately not been able to either touch or understand the subject of the mind. There is in humanities a branch called human psychology, but the theories that it has produced so far are all undigested, half-baked views that do not seem to relate to our personal experiences with the mind and do not give us tools for controlling and managing our minds. Further, the endeavor, the goal of science was not merely practical utility, but a search for the truth. We looked upon science as a means for solving the mystery of life and creation. Has science succeeded in giving us the answers that exist within us regarding the absolute truth? Let us ponder over this for a moment. What is the truth? It is something that conforms to the reality of facts. It could also be something that is accepted to be true. For example, if I say, this is a watch, that is the truth. And if I say this is a flower, that is the untruth. However, this truth can be of two kinds: relative and absolute. For example, if a lady wears red colored glasses and I ask her, can you please describe the color of this watch? She would say it is red in color. What she is saying is the truth, but it is the truth relative to her. If a gentleman were to wear green colored glasses and I was to ask him, could you please describe the color of this watch? He would say it is green in color. Again, he is saying the truth, but the relative truth. So the relative truth is that which is dependent upon the cognitive process of the knower, whereas the absolute truth is that which is true for everybody. In general, the absolute truth is that which is independent of parameters, context, and perspectives. Another way of putting this is to say the absolute truth is that which cannot be exceeded in quality. So, for example, around the year 1675, when Sir Isaac Newton presented his laws of motion, at that time that was accepted as the absolute truth. Newton stated that space is three-dimensional. Time flows through space without tainting or mingling with space in any way. Force is proportional to mass and distance and acts instantaneously between space. So, from the perspective of Newtonian mechanics, this entire world was like a huge machine. And if we knew the present moment and found out all the forces at work, the next moment could be perfectly predicted. However, after Newton came Michael Faraday. He passed a magnet through wire and produced electric current. By doing that, he went beyond the laws of motion presented by Newton and presented a higher level of understanding of the physical truths of this universe. After Faraday came Maxwell. He went beyond Faraday and replaced the concept of force by force field. He stated that a proton with a positive charge has a force field around it irrespective of a negative charge. This led to a new understanding of the nature of light. Light now came to be understood as a rapidly changing force field, and we got the understanding of the electromagnetic spectrum. After that came the famous Albert Einstein, who exceeded all these in his presentation of the truth with his theory of relativity. He said that space and time are not independent but related to each other, and two observers moving at different velocities will order events differently. He also stated that matter at rest possesses energy to the extent described by his famous equation E is equal to mc square. At the same time, there were advances taking place in the field of chemistry. And all of you in your high school chemistry have heard of Rutherford. He bombarded atoms with alpha particles and measured the counts with the Geiger counter behind. Thereby, he found that this atom is not a solid particle as it is understood to be, but consists of tremendous empty space. In fact, 99.99% of the atom is empty space. Around the 1920s, Niels Bohr and his fellow scientists came up with the quantum theory. They stated that at the subatomic level, matter is not what we think of it to be in the classical concept. It doesn't exist at places but shows tendencies to exist. So the whole concept of matter changed into an energy field. Now the question came of synthesizing the quantum theory with Einstein's theories. Because at the subatomic level, particles move at tremendous speed. The electron moves at 600 miles per second, and the proton moves at 40,000 miles per second. So there was a need to reconcile Einstein's theory with the quantum theory. If that could be done, that would be considered the absolute truth on this subject. However, such a theory has not yet been reached in the field of science. So in the physical sciences, we are still to reach a proper understanding of the absolute truth. And if we do find such a theory, there is no guarantee that it will not be superseded by another theory after a few more decades. What then is the absolute truth? Now come to the other issues or questions that exist in our minds. What is the purpose of creation? What is the nature of the self? Why have we come into existence? What is the goal of life? What is the basis of ethics and morality? Are there any absolute answers to these questions? Or is it all relative? Many people would have us to believe that there are no absolute answers to these questions, and we are all free to define the truth as we feel appropriate to ourselves. There are others who would say that there are absolute answers. This question of the existence of absolute truth is very important when we come to the field of ethics, because ethics deals with what is right and what is wrong. We all hate certain kinds of behaviors and prefer other kinds of behavior. However, if there is no absolute rightness or wrongness of anything, we are all free to define ethics and morality the way we wish. This idea seems very attractive at first. However, if it is taken to its logical conclusion, it can be disastrous. For example, what if somebody says it is right for me to drive through a traffic light even when it is wrong? And by doing so, that person endangers the lives of so many others. You may say that what you are doing is wrong. The person would reply, it is wrong for you, but it's certainly not wrong for me. What is if it is right for a terrorist to explode a bomb in a heavily populated area, thereby causing destruction to life? Now, that person may feel very strongly that what he is doing is right in according to his views and philosophical viewpoint. But does that make him truly right? If there is no absolute rightness and wrongness, there is no way we could contradict that person. This present era is called sociologists have given different labels to different eras in society in the Western world. So, for example, we had the Renaissance, we had the Dark Ages before that, and there have been other periods such as the Baroque age, the age of enlightenment, the age of humanism, the existential age, when certain views dominated society. And this present age, this is the age of postmodernism. And the characteristic of the postmodernist age is that people believe there is no such thing as the absolute truth. You are free to define truth the way you believe. And the truth is a personal matter that cannot extend beyond personal boundaries. Multitudes in the West have rejected the concept of there being any absolute truth because of so many theories being propounded from different sides, being superseded by other theories. So the question then remains, is there a truth? Can science help us in finding it? And after all, science itself is based on the assumption that there are absolute realities in nature. These realities can be determined and quantified into laws. Now, if there is no absolute truth, the whole endeavor of science loses its foundation. There is no meaning to science if there are no absolute realities in nature. And besides, what about the field of logic? When I convey ideas to you, when you ask questions to me, when scientists interact with each other, there is an underlying assumption that there are universal laws of logic that are acceptable to all humankind. Now, if there is no absolute truth related to logic, there is no longer any means of conveying ideas between people. One philosopher may say that my laws of logic are different from yours. So, if there is no absolute truth, where does that leave our entire endeavor for knowledge? Fortunately, in pure mathematics, there is a way of proving the existence of the absolute truth. There is a technique called reductio ad absurdum. If you wish to prove a hypothesis, you take its reverse in the premise and show that this leads to a contradiction. So, if the reverse of the premise leads to a contradiction, that proves that this premise is necessary. Hence, if you wish to prove that there is an absolute truth, you take the reverse of it. There is no absolute truth. So, there is no absolute truth? Yes. Is your statement absolutely true? Now, if the person says, no, it's not absolutely true. Well, if it's not absolutely true, then why are you insisting that there is no absolute truth? There may be. And if the person says, yes, the statement is absolutely true, so that is the absolute truth, that there is no absolute truth. So, this technique has been used by mathematicians. Now, let us see what does the field of spirituality have to contribute to, to this endeavor for the absolute truth, and how these branches of science and spirituality can be made to converge. We will go through a series of arguments, so the entire picture will be clear till the end. I will request you all to please follow the chain of arguments carefully. Spirituality says that this field of science has been founded on the basis of certain assumptions. For example, the assumption is there is no God. Now, this is an assumption. Nobody has proved it. Can anybody prove that there is no God? You can only prove it if you know everything that exists. Because if you do not know one thing that exists, it's possible that one thing is God. So in science, we have made certain assumptions and we have moved ahead on the basis of those assumptions. For example, Newtonian mechanics was founded on the assumptions of Euclidean geometry. You remember the Euclidean geometry you learnt in school? There were certain postulates. For example, the first postulate was that given 2 points, there is only one line that can pass through both of them. Now, there was a mathematician called Riemann. He changed this postulate. The first postulate of Einstein, he said that given 2 points, there are 2 lines that can pass through them. And on the basis of that, he developed his whole Riemann geometry. Then along came another mathematician called Lobachevsky. He relooked Euclid's fifth postulate, which states that given a line and a point, there is only one line that can be drawn through that point, parallel to the first line. So he said, no, there are 2 lines that can be drawn through that point parallel to this first line. And he came up with Lobachevsky's geometry. Einstein, in his theory, to establish his theory of relativity, he utilized Lobachevsky's geometry. So even in science, we are making assumptions. I was reading the statement by Professor Towns, a scientist. He says, even science involves the leap of faith.